What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Excited to be with you on another podcast episode. Today, I bring a special guest, Aaron Shavel. He's a professional engineer in the New York area and is working on some fascinating projects in New York. And his experience, though, is being a project manager and managing just massive projects. And so I wanted to bring him on and talk about his role as a project manager, how he found himself into that world, maybe some of the characteristics that would be good to have for someone in civil engineering that wants to go the project management route, and all the details that go along with that. So we just have a great conversation about the projects he's working on, everything it took to become a project manager, why he likes it, and also some fun stuff about certifications that he has gotten that help his career as well. So I'm going to shut up and we'll get to our interview with Aaron right after this, but pay attention if you want to become a project manager. Aaron's doing some amazing things. He's active on LinkedIn. Please connect with him there and see what's going on. I think you will really enjoy it as well. So without further ado, let's get to that right after this. See you in a minute. Before we actually dive into today's episode, I have some exciting news to share with you to start out this new year the best possible way. We're going to be running this entire month a sale to help make sure you kick all these NCEES exams in the butt once and for all and get them all passed. And that is that throughout this month, we're going to be offering 20% off any of our courses that we offer. So that means FE, PE, CFM review courses that we have out there for you. So whatever exam is standing in the way of you actually getting licensed and leveling up your career as well as your income, we're going to be here to help you knock this thing. So to take advantage of this, go check out links in our description for your particular course, or go check out civilengineeringacademy.com and use the discount code New Year Sell at checkout. The discount will automatically be applied to any access option that you choose, whatever works for you. It is simple as that. So again, just click on the course link that applies to what you're looking for and use that discount code New Year Sell at checkout and get 20% off. So it's exciting news. Let's get back to the episode. Thanks for tuning in. Let's make this a great new year and a boost to your career and your life. So with that, we'll see you in a minute. All right, we are rocking and rolling. Aaron, thank you for joining me today on the Civil Engineering Academy podcast. Appreciate you doing this with me.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited. We kind of found you. I know you did a podcast with the ASCE, talking about how your mom influenced your career choice and such. I always start these out, you explaining your own background and how you got yourself into civil engineering in the first place.
Sure. Yeah, I feel pretty fortunate. I always kind of knew what I wanted to do. Always knew I wanted to work in construction. Grew up in a construction family. My mom spent about 15 years working as a project manager for a large civil company in New Jersey and New York as a project manager. Eventually started her own reinforcing steel subcontractor business. So I grew up around it. Grew up on job sites, crawling in and out of machines. So I kind of always knew that's what I wanted to do. I went to RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, engineering school in upstate New York, oldest engineering school in America, first civil engineering degree in America. Studied civil engineering there, and then moved to New York City, joined a general contractor, focused on MTA construction and been building train stations, rehabilitating train stations and train systems for about a decade now. So always knew it was going to be construction. Didn't know exactly how that'd work out, but yeah, pretty steadfast in that.
I like it. Where was Dad in this picture? Was he involved with this career?
So he's not in construction. He's in manufacturing, textiles, import export. So also very busy businessman. Got to see a lot of different perspectives from him as well. So two totally different industries. But yeah, definitely good insight from both of them.
Wow.
And interesting house to grow up in for sure.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And do you have siblings?
Yeah, so I have a younger brother who also, followed, I guess, our mother's footsteps into construction. He's an electrical and computer systems engineer. So he actually came out the industry from a completely different angle. So he works at TCE. We both at the same company I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he's actually our innovation manager. So he runs a team of dedicated engineers and basically does all of our innovation implementations. So everything from open space to Procore to some in-house technology, which is pretty cool. We get to see it from two different angles, get to work together. But yeah, definitely kind of a construction family for sure.
Wow, that's awesome. Gosh. So, and then just real briefly, you passed your FE. I'm assuming you did that through school and then worked on the PE after.
Yeah, so everyone told me take it before you graduate. I was a college athlete. I played lacrosse spring season. Our school, ArcAd, did a great job of offering classes. Of course, it was in the spring, couldn't do that. And when I graduated, everyone said take it before the year's out. I took the advice. I took my FE the end of that summer. And I'm sure you share this advice always, but do not wait. Like take it right away while that stuff's fresh in your mind. And then it took me about 5 years to get the 4 years of experience. And fortunate enough to pass it on my first time. I actually I was the last of the handwritten version before it went computerized.
Oh, wow.
So what was that, 2021, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
Something like that.
What did you take it in? Construction? Did you take the PE?
General civil construction, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, man, this stuff runs in your
Yeah.
family. Your mom's doing this stuff. Your mom had her own business. Why didn't you work for her, or did you?
I haven't worked for her. She's still very much working. She's worked on basically every big exciting bridge project in the New York, New Jersey area. So she's involved in the Verrazano, the Goethals, the Pulaski Skyway, the Bayonne Bridge. She's done piers at Port of Newark. She's done expansions at Newark Airport. She has a great business. Yeah,
She hasn't tried to pull you into that.
She's tried a couple of times. For right now, I love working at a GC and all the excitement and complications that presents itself. Right, in a world-class education and basically everything. Sub management, all the different technical components. You get to see everything as a general contractor. And that's part of the most exciting part about it, really.
That's awesome. So you graduated in civil engineering. How did you end up being a project manager? How did you get into that route? Why was that the route you ended up kind of going into?
I think project manager, you kind of get to see the full lay of the land, right? So you're involved in all the technical stuff to some extent, right? You have to remove yourself a little bit, but the financials, the costs, you're basically driving the ship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where my career took me. It started as a field engineer, project engineer, APM. There's basically two routes if you're working for a contractor, right? Do you want to be a senior level specialist engineer? Do you want to be a superintendent, or do you want to be a project manager where you kind of just bring all those components together? And I kind of consider myself a jack of all trades, and I feel like I'm very good at bringing all those things together. And again, you get to do all the different components to an extent. So I think that's kind of what drew me to PM, especially in a general contractor.
So I'm just curious because there's probably a lot of engineers out there that are wondering which kind of career path they want to head. Would you have maybe some qualities that you think would be important to build or have if you were going to go the project management route?
Yeah. I think the first one is, and I've kind of already said it, is jack of all trades, and that comes from curiosity. So I find one of the pitfalls we find with young engineers coming out of school is they go, I'm an electrical engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, that's what I do. I'm a civil engineer, I'm looking at structural steel. And being a specialist is fantastic, but you need to understand everything else around you. So one thing I hate is when a civil-minded field engineer goes, oh, I don't need to know that that's the electrical stuff, right? Like I don't need to know why that's hung up there. And that's the absolute wrong answer, right? It's, you may not even understand, exactly what's going in the conduit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or why it has to go to this panel or whatnot, but you need to understand how everything ties together. So curiosity is one, understanding why everything has to go together. And then, the second one is communication skills, right? So you're talking to, if you're in the field, you're talking to, craft labor, you're talking to a designer, you're talking to an owner rep. You could be explaining the same thing to all three of them in very different manners, right? I think the verbal communication is one thing. The next thing that I think is very difficult for engineers and really separates, good engineers from great engineers is the written communication. Understanding how to convey your point across, making difficult technical decisions in bite-sized components written clearly. Technical writing, or even just communication writing, not even technical, is one of the biggest hurdles for young engineers and can be like the biggest differentiating factor.
Hmm.
And that's true for regardless, not just PMs.
Oh yeah, that's for certain. I'm just curious, what's been the most challenging thing you've had to communicate to anybody, I guess, as a project manager? Has it been a massive change order? We screwed up? What's been something that you've had to deal with?
On the technical side, it's always surveying. I'm not really sure why, but we can never seem to get our survey. And whenever we're talking about survey, it's always like we're shooting across the bow. But I think the financials is something that is, like you said, it is difficult. There are varying levels of financial understanding. Like the superintendent, the field engineer have a different understanding or have a different requirement of what they need to understand compared to what you're explaining to the executives, the guys I have to report to. Mm-hmm. Every company has a little bit of different terminology. Construction accounting is a finicky thing. So that's always difficult to kind of try to convey. But then again, like in terms of like technical communication, explaining to, the electricians why they can't put their conduit right through a structural grade beam, or why the grade beam needs to go somewhere else because, there's a pipe 5 feet away and you have to explain the distribution, right? So it's always across disciplines where you're having to explain a technical concept for someone else who may not be their expertise for them to understand.
That makes sense. Yeah. And as a PM, communication seems to be, I don't know if it's the number one thing, but it's got to be up there. So
absolutely.
There's one thing on your, I guess, LinkedIn profiles. I was kind of snooping around a little bit, but you have an awesome certification called the Design Build certification. Could you dive into like what that is and the value of having that?
Sure. So Design Build Institute of America is a pretty great organization. I drank the Kool-Aid, as I like to say. I was actually last week at their national conference. So depending where you are in the country, Design Build could be relatively new. The Pacific Northwest has been doing it for 20, 30 years. It's ingrained in the agencies and the contractors and the designers' mindset, all the practitioners. It's only within the last decade on the East Coast in real meaningful manner at even like a legislative level. But we're starting to see Design Build is like the project delivery of choice for a lot of these large owners. The idea is that the contract or the owner puts together a general idea of what they want built, and then they put it to the practitioners, the designers and the contractors to develop the whole thing. So you're shrinking the entire bid process, pre-bid, all of the pre-engineering. You're going to save all this extra time. And then also, how many times have you, been in the field and you go, who designed that? Like, we can't build that, right? The idea is that excuse goes away because you're in the room when it gets designed. So I learned about Design Build or DBIA 5 years ago on one of the first MTA projects, Metropolitan Transit Authority. And more I read about, I came upon DBIA at about 2-3 months in between jobs, when you're kind of on the bench waiting to be placed somewhere. And I got involved, took the course, went through the certification process, and it was great. Part of the value is there's a bunch of other people who around the country who've gone through all the headaches you have, and you're able to bounce stuff off of them. So it's good community, great resource. I strongly recommend people get involved in that, or at least do their research into it.
I'm just curious for myself, but is there an exam that's administered? And
it's a 3-day seminar, so remote or online, 3 8-hour sessions. And they have different industry professionals talk, and it's really informative to get good printouts and all that kind of stuff. And then it's a 100-question multiple choice. It's not as rigorous as a PE, but I think it's definitely worthwhile. And then they have 2 certifications: an associate for folks who are just building their design build pedigree.
Mhm.
And the professional designation, which is you have to have 3 years of experience. So you write a little resume, they review it, and they're pretty friendly with the review. They're not like some states PE review boards, which can be a little difficult to get through.
Definitely so. Well, it sounds like a great thing to have on a resume, and something that could build your career. I'm assuming more employers are maybe even looking for that on
Yeah,
the
it's
job board.
definitely starting to gain some traction, and I think there are some agencies who will actually request it from project managers or higher level personnel.
Okay. Well, oftentimes when I hear about project managers, there's also another certification that gets floated around quite a bit. I'm curious your thought about the PMP, um, for civil engineers. What's your thoughts around that?
I've looked at it. Um, I got pre-approved to take the exam, and I just never got around to it. I know some folks who have. They speak highly of it. I'm sure there's a place for it. Yeah,
Okay.
I,
Awesome.
I think I think always I think the PE should be the first and foremost. I think the PE should be the first and foremost. But yeah, there's always value to additional accreditations in education.
Makes sense. Well, let's dive into a little bit of the work you're doing. What's maybe describe one of the most complex infrastructure projects you've worked on, and what are some of the challenges you faced with that?
Yeah. So I spent the 10 years of my career doing all MTA construction, right? So New York City Transit and Long Island Railroad, the big subway system and commuter rails inside of New York City. Um, all of our jobs are, regardless of the complexity of the actual job, are difficult. You're working inside of existing train stations. In some cases, 120 years old. We're working off hand drawn as built.
Mm.
Uh, and then also, New York City subway is the only 24/7 subway in the world. There are no days off. There's no work window. You have to request months out. 8 hours, 53-hour, general order outages. So that right off the bat is incredibly complex. The access is a nightmare, but it's part of what makes it really fun. So I've done, signal upgrades, 5 miles of complete track replacement, signal upgrades. That's when I started as a field engineer. That was a cool job. Worked as a project engineer doing station rehabilitation. So inside of Penn Station, basically gutting and renovating those subway entrances while active. So 200,000 people a day were walking through our station. We replaced 8,000 square feet of flooring and 8,000 square feet of ceiling, and basically had people walking through little mazes every single day, trying to move them from one spot to another. So that was really challenging. I think the most exciting project I worked on recently is Long Island Railroad Elmont Station. So it was a brand new Long Island Railroad train station, their first new train station in 50 years. And it was built for the new New York Islanders NHL stadium. That's my favorite team. So it was incredibly exciting to be there while they built the stadium. We built the train station. But that was a station along the existing right of way, busiest single line of track, commuter track in North America, right? Long Island Railroad's the biggest commuter rail. So trains going by 80 miles an hour all day.
Mm.
And then we had to build basically the platform extended over an active highway adjacent to a rail bridge. So just incredibly complex structural issues, access issues. We got to use a million different kinds of lulls, cranes, crazy different boom configurations. So yeah, that was really fun. That was a really cool show. And then the project I'm working on now is an ADA upgrade for the MTA. 4 stations in 4 separate boroughs, 8 elevators and escalator, station rehabilitation, bringing it up to ADA standard. So on top of the challenges of working in 110-year-old stations, we have a team of 45 people, and one end to the other are opposite sides of the city, about 2.5 hours by subway.
Man.
So just on top of the technical complexities, the organizational and geographic obstacles are incredibly challenging. And again, we got to be super organized and communication, right? All goes back to that.
Yeah. And you live in New York, and it has its unique challenges too, with just the infrastructure that you're dealing with and the age of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of curious. Well, first of all, I just want to say, hey, Utah just got its first, and we got an NHL team, a professional NHL team.
Yeah.
I'll be watching who they're playing. Um, Utah Hockey Club. I'm excited to watch them.
Yeah, it should be great. I've heard the fans are all behind it, so I'm excited for that organization too. Should be cool.
Yeah, I'm hearing maybe their name may be the Yetis next year. We'll see.
So, hearing that, I'm hearing Blizzards. Although I think with the Avalanche, you can't have two snow motifs. I think they got to change it up a little bit.
Too close. Too close.
Yes.
Well, as you were talking about all this and just talking about the age of infrastructure, you're working with old hand drawn drawings and such. I'm just kind of curious what, in your position and what you're seeing out there, what's some of the technological advancements that you're using right now and maybe what you're excited for in the future?
So I'm going to come at that from, I guess, two different angles. I think, first off, anyone who's in this space is kind of at this point inundated with all of the new technology innovation coming into our industry. And I think we're about to get over the hump where the first iteration of it in the last couple of years has been software. And a lot of it has been incredibly helpful, but there's only so many ways we can reorganize our document control, right, and our workflows. And I think we're coming onto the other side where we're going to see like either hardware or tangible technologies that will kind of advance it. One thing I'm really excited about, and I've tried to implement as much as possible, is prefabrication. Anytime you can remove a variable, you can do something off-site. You eliminate time in the field, labor, safety concerns. You're able to ensure quality. It's an immense opportunity. Long Island Railroad Station I was talking about earlier, we did 2,400 linear feet of platform, all prefabricated. All of our back of house buildings for all of our mechanical and electrical components, all of those wall panels were all precast with brick facades cast in. The elevator shaft was precast. Our pedestrian bridge was built on the wayside. It came in pieces. We built it on wayside and picked it in one piece. So I took that experience to this project, and we, a couple of weeks ago, just installed our first precast elevator shaft.
Wow.
So basically 30 feet below grade, came in about 5 different segments, locked together. All the waterproofing was pre-installed. We installed that in the elevator, the actual above ground structural head house, in about 12 hours.
Wow.
That would have taken about 3 weeks. Traditional Catholic is concrete. Yeah. Between cure times and strip and waterproofing, 3 weeks is optimistic. And we've already done 3 others, and one took 3 weeks and one took 5 weeks. And we did it in 12 hours.
Wow.
So I think that is an incredibly exciting opportunity. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I mean, that's old news in bridge construction.
Yeah.
I think we're just going to find new and more creative ways to do that.
That's amazing. I've heard you talk about this being the civil engineering golden age. What defines that era for you?
I think we're seeing, it's in the news every day, right? We're seeing unprecedented amount of public money being thrown everywhere. I mean, you haven't seen this kind of expansion and public interest in infrastructure since like the interstate system. And I think what's becoming apparent is that, the public is starting to learn these are not one-time investments. These are recurring investments. These are things that need to continue to happen. So not only is there all this public and federal and state level money, there's also incredible public appetite for it. We're always building in New York, but the last couple of years have been, very different. All 3 New York airports are undergoing multi-billion-dollar renovations. All of the bridges in the area, they've either gone through deck replacements or cable replacements. The subway systems are seeing massive upgrades. But it's not just the money being spent, but it's also just the public appetite, the willingness. I think there's a lot of really exciting things going on. It's a great time to be in the industry.
I totally agree. And I work in the utility world, and there is a massive amount of money being spent into upgrading infrastructure, Wildfires, kind of the big buzzword out here, but
Okay.
you have systems that are old and just money has not been spent to upgrade things, and life cycle is, these stuff is reaching its life cycle and needs to be replaced. So,
So that's actually like one of my biggest like professional pet peeves, right? Is like we don't maintenance isn't sexy, right? We wait for the thing to deteriorate or to age out and then we replace it like it's an iPhone, we throw it away.
yeah.
These are right, these are multi-billion-dollar investments and we're designing them for 70-year lifespans with the idea of like, okay, it'll last 70 years, it'll deteriorate and replace it, rather than um, you know, designing and building to avoid obsolescence, right?
Or even maintaining what you have. There's ways to maintain that.
Or you design it like a bridge deck. You design it so they're orthotropics, decks segments, so you can remove them and replace them in 30 years.
All right.
I think the worst example of this is our stadiums and arenas.
Mm-hmm.
I think place is super important, right? Like you go to a famous arena. I hate to admit it because I don't want to give Ranger fans any credence, but like you walk into MSG, right? Like there's magnitude to the place. Like place is important.
Oh, for sure.
And I think like we're building stadiums for 30 years and then knocking them down, rather than saying like, how do we give ourselves the opportunity to either refurbish this, like we build it for the possibility of refurbishment, or build it for the possibility of expansion in 20, 30 years for whatever the new needs are. And I just think like that's like the biggest example of that pet peeve of mine. Thank you for indulging that.
Stadiums are a big deal. It seems like you hear more and more in the news of some stadium being torn down and a new location of a place.
Right.
And yeah, I agree with you. Some of these places have history to them, and there's an energy and a feeling when you go into a building that's been there forever, and you just want to tear it down. Like, come on. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
I'm a tortured New York Jets fan, and MetLife is just soul sucking, right? It's just like this.
Yeah.
It's terrible to get to. It has no character. It's just a giant cinder block. And you're like, they'll tear this down in 10 years. They'll say they got 25 years out of it. Good enough. It's a shame, right? Like, build things for like
back. You're supposed to have a good quarterback over there.
Yeah. You keep waiting.
Well, all right. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I appreciate everything you've shared with us and your experience becoming a project manager. Is there any advice you'd give younger engineers that are aspiring to either work in infrastructure or even in New York? Because some engineers do want to bounce around and experience different things. Many want to go to bigger cities and see what that's like. But any advice for younger engineers?
Absolutely. And I touched on it earlier. It's to be a jack of all trades. I think it's important that you have a specialty and you have your area of expertise. But if you're able to, be a structural engineer and sit in the room with the architects, I mean, that makes a huge deal, right? And then you're empathetic to where they want to hang their ceiling grid, and you can incorporate that into your structural design, or you understand why the electrical engineers and designers want to run their routing in a certain way and hang their lights. It's just incredibly important to understand all the different components around you and to be involved with it. Again, I'm a civil-minded PM and I work for an electrical contractor. We work as a GC, but I'm still surrounded by electrical engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of like our big mantras. Like, we don't really care what kind of engineer you are. It's that you're an engineer, or at least have the engineering mindset, and to ask the questions, to go to talk to people. And then the second part of that, curiosity and all that, is talk to everybody on the whole chain of command and the whole integration, right? So it's one thing to talk to the electrical designer. Go talk to the electrical PM. Go talk to the electrical foreman. Go talk to the electrician, right? Understand that is what the electrical designer telling you really what the foreman and the electrician are going to install in the field. Can they actually do it? The classic example we always have at TCE is like a 4-inch conduit. You can draw it however you want on a piece of paper, right? 4-inch conduit doesn't bend, right? Class 90, like it's pretty static. So like there's different realities that you can't experience unless you really go out and ask all those questions and start to put over, layers of experience and just exposure. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's amazing. Great advice. Well, thank you for doing this. As a project manager, I'm sure you're keeping, that lovely triangle of scope, schedule, and budget all tied together.
Do my best.
I know a lot of engineers, they might not know this, but when you get into this field, scope is like a big deal. And I'm sure as a project manager, you have to dive into that quite heavily into understanding the project itself. Could you touch on that just a little bit as we close here?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, my team makes fun of me because I have like 3 giant binders on my desk all the time. So I have our full scope of work. I have our full scope of work printed out, and highlighted, and then I have all of our subcontractors highlighted and tabbed too. You got to know what you're managing, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone's first response is, "Hey, it's not my responsibility." It's always someone's responsibility. Someone owns it somewhere down the line. You need to understand that. So I guess, and I'll kind of curtail back to the other thing. One of my other pieces of advice, and this goes with the same thing on scope, is like, we always tell our team, like, we have to be the best prepared. We have to know what the scope of work is better than the subcontractor does, better than the owner knows.
Yeah.
Right. So you just gotta know the scope of work. Right. And, if you don't, you gotta have a clever excuse on how to pin it back on the owner.
That's right. Change order. Just kidding.
Exactly. Yeah, you said it, not me.
Well, Aaron, thank you for doing this. I appreciate all your advice. If someone had some questions about either the work you do or how to get into this industry or even learning about project management, what's the best way to contact you and ask questions?
LinkedIn. All my information is on there. Feel free to drop me a line. I'm pretty active on there and would be happy to answer any questions.
Sounds great. All right. Thanks, Aaron. We will catch up with you later.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
See ya.